Welcome back to LexTalk, exploring English and linguistics right here in Thailand. We love diving deep into all things language,
Yeah.
especially for our awesome educators, parents, and anyone out there who just loves the English language.
That's right.
And today we're tackling a topic that probably hits close to home for many of you. Those frustrating language plateaus. You know that feeling, right? You're cruising along, making progress, and bam, it's like you hit a wall.
Yeah,
But hold on, because we're going to unpack all of that with our language expert who's here to help us decode these plateaus and, most importantly, figure out how to blast right through them.
absolutely.
Welcome to the show. So let's start with the basics. For our listeners who might be new to this concept, what exactly is a language plateau?
Well, think of it like this. You're putting in the effort, you're studying, you're practicing, but it feels like you're just treading water. Your progress seems to have stalled, and you're not seeing those gains you used to. Now, it's important to remember that it's not that your abilities are actually declining. It's more about the perception of stalled progress.
That makes sense. It's like you've been hiking uphill and suddenly the trail seems to level off. You're still putting in the effort, but the scenery isn't changing as rapidly as it used to.
Exactly. And it's particularly common among intermediate and advanced learners.
So it's almost like a rite of passage for those who are really committed to mastering the language.
You could say that. And there are a number of reasons why these plateaus occur.
Okay, so let's dig into those reasons. Why do these plateaus happen? I mean, what's going on in our brains that makes it feel like we've hit a wall?
Well, one factor is that, well, let's face it, the low-hanging fruit has been picked. You've mastered the basics, the present tense, past tense, maybe even tackled the future tense. You're feeling pretty good, right? But then you encounter those more complex grammatical structures.
Oh, I know what you mean. Like
Right.
trying to wrap your head around conditional clauses or navigating the nuances of the subjunctive mood.
Exactly. Or maybe you start noticing how native speakers use idioms and slang so naturally. Suddenly, those initial gains you made feel small in comparison to the vastness of what's still out there to learn.
It's like you've reached the base camp of Mount Everest and you realize the real climb is just beginning.
That's a great analogy. And another reason why plateaus happen is that, without realizing it, learners often fall into comfortable routines.
So we get stuck in our linguistic comfort zones, sticking with what we know and avoiding those challenges that would actually help us grow.
Exactly. It's like a runner who only trains on flat surfaces and then wonders why they struggle on hills. You need to push those boundaries and intentionally seek out those areas that feel a bit beyond your grasp.
It's about embracing those moments of productive struggle, right? Those times when you're wrestling with a new concept or trying to express yourself in a way that feels a bit awkward or uncomfortable.
Absolutely. Remember, growth happens outside of our comfort zones. Now, another sneaky culprit behind those plateaus is an over-reliance on passive learning.
Uh-oh. I think I know where this is going.
Huh.
You're talking about that Netflix fluency myth, aren't you?
You caught me. Don't get me wrong. There's nothing wrong with enjoying a good show or listening to music in English.
Yeah.
But if that's your only exposure to the language, you're likely to plateau.
So passive learning is great for exposure and getting a feel for the language, but to really internalize it, you need to be actively using it.
Exactly. Imagine a student who religiously watches cooking shows but never steps into the kitchen to actually try a recipe. They might be able to rattle off ingredients, but could they whip up a delicious meal?
Not a chance. They might have the theory down, but they lack the practical skills.
Precisely. It's the same with language. Passive learning can create a false sense of progress, which can actually contribute to hitting that plateau. To
Mhm.
truly master a language, you need to actively practice speaking, writing, interacting, making those glorious mistakes that lead to real growth.
So it's like with any skill, the more you actively use it, the stronger it becomes. Okay, so we've talked about comfort zones and passive learning. What other sneaky culprits are lurking out there, ready to trap us on a plateau?
Well, this one might sting a bit, but sometimes it boils down to a lack of honest feedback. You might be using a particular grammar structure incorrectly or mispronouncing a word, but without someone pointing it out, a teacher, a tutor, or even a language learning app, you might keep repeating those mistakes. And those subtle errors, when left unchecked, can actually hinder your progress.
It's like having a blind spot that you're completely unaware of.
Yeah.
So feedback is essential, not just for encouragement, but also for identifying those areas that need fine-tuning.
Precisely. And closely related to that is the fear of making mistakes. I can't tell you how many advanced learners I've met who are terrified of sounding imperfect. They'd rather stick to simpler sentences or avoid certain situations altogether, which ironically prevents them from getting the practice they need to truly improve.
It's like that fear of judgment holds them back from taking those risks that are essential for growth.
Exactly. And finally, and this is a big one, the lack of clear, specific goals can often lead to a plateau.
Oh.
If you're just aimlessly floating along in the sea of language learning, it's easy to drift into a comfort zone and lose sight of what you're actually working towards.
So it's not just about putting in the hours, it's about having a roadmap, a destination in mind.
Precisely. Think of it like setting off on a journey without knowing where you want to go. You might wander aimlessly, enjoying the scenery, but would you ever actually arrive?
Definitely not. You might end up going in circles.
Exactly. Having those goals, those milestones to strive for, gives direction and purpose to your language learning journey.
That makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
So it's not enough to just say, I want to be fluent. You need to break that down into smaller, more specific, and achievable goals. Like, I want to learn 10 new business English phrases this week and use them confidently in a mock meeting.
Exactly. That way you're not just drifting, you're actively navigating your way towards fluency.
That's such a powerful way to put it. It's about taking control of the ship and setting sail with a clear destination in mind.
Welcome back, everyone. So are you ready to actually ditch those plateaus and really get fluent?
You bet. In that first part, we talked about those sneaky things, that make us feel stuck, like falling into routines, being passive about learning, and not setting goals. But now I think it's time for solutions, right? Like, how do we break free?
Yeah, totally. So first, we got to shake things up a bit. Remember those routines we were talking about? Yeah, well, it's time to ditch them. Like if you've been just doing casual conversation practice, time to step it up a notch.
So you're saying instead of just chatting about the weather, maybe try, I don't know, giving a presentation or writing a blog post in English even, something challenging.
Exactly. Go beyond that comfort zone and embrace those productive struggles.
Productive struggles. I love that. Our brains like a good challenge, right?
Yeah.
So we need to push them a bit.
Yeah, think about it like strength training, but for your language. You got to lift those heavier weights to get those gains.
Okay, so instead of just passively watching a show, maybe try writing a review of it. Or even imagine you're the screenwriter.
Exactly. And that kind of leads to the whole immersion thing, right? And I
Yeah.
don't mean booking a flight overseas. I mean creating that immersion right here, right now.
So what, like switching my phone to English
Yeah.
or like listening to podcasts in English.
Yeah. Even just switching your phone settings. It's those little things.
Yeah.
Or subscribing to English news channels.
I do that. Like listen to podcasts while I'm doing chores. It's
Yeah.
a nice way to fit it in.
Totally. And don't underestimate just talking with people in a language exchange group or finding a partner online.
It's like taking your language skills out for a spin,
Yeah.
right? See how they handle the real world. And speaking of testing things out, feedback is so important, right? To catch those blind spots we talked about earlier.
Absolutely. Working with a tutor or a coach can give you that personalized guidance. But hey, there's also some really cool AI tools out there, like Grammarly.
Oh yeah, Grammarly. It's like having a personal editor on call, like 24/7. Technology is pretty amazing for language learning these days. But even with all the tools and everything, sometimes, motivation can just dip, especially when you're stuck on a plateau. What do we do about that?
That's where those SMART goals come in. Remember those. It's like having a GPS for your language journey.
Refresh my memory. What does SMART stand for again? Sometimes those acronyms, they just,
No worries. It's specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound. So instead of saying, I want to be better at English, a SMART goal is more like, okay, this week I'm going to learn 10 idioms, the ones they use in business. And by Friday, I'm going to use them correctly when I talk to my language partner.
I get it. Breaking it down like that makes it seem less overwhelming. And having that deadline definitely adds some, accountability.
Exactly. And you know what? Keep track of your progress. Use an app, a journal, whatever works for you. But seeing those little wins can really boost your motivation.
Like leveling up in a game.
Yeah.
Gives you that little boost to keep going. Now, we've talked about the practical stuff, but what about the mental game? Those feelings of frustration when you feel like you're not moving forward.
Yeah. Well, that's where the growth mindset comes in. Super important.
We've mentioned this before, but can you break it down for us? Like, what does it actually mean, especially for, someone learning a language?
So it's basically the belief that your abilities aren't fixed. They can be developed through hard work, practice, all that good stuff.
Mm.
And instead of seeing challenges as roadblocks, you see them as opportunities to learn and grow.
So instead of I'm bad at grammar, it's grammar's a challenge, but I'm going to nail it with practice.
Exactly. It's about changing that self-talk, to something more positive and powerful.
Wow. Time flies when you're having fun. I feel like we've covered so much ground today talking about plateaus, those sneaky things that hold us back, and
Hmm.
all the awesome ways to overcome them.
Totally. It's been great. The main thing to remember is that plateaus, they're normal. Like everyone hits them, it's just part of the process.
Right. It's not a sign of failure. It's just a, little bump in the road. And we've got the tools to deal with those bumps now, right?
Absolutely. It's all about having those right tools and, that growth mindset. You can totally blast through these things and keep moving towards fluency.
I love that.
Yeah.
But before we wrap things up, I want to leave our listeners with a little challenge, okay? Think about one thing you can do this week, something specific, to push yourself a little bit
Mm,
and reignite that passion for learning English.
I like that. Could be something small, like just having a conversation in English every day, even if it's just to yourself in the mirror.
Uh-huh, yeah. Or finally trying out that language app you downloaded months ago. Or signing up for that online course you've been thinking about.
Exactly. Those little steps, they add up. Every little bit brings you closer to your goals.
Absolutely. And hey, remember, we're here to support you on your language journey, so don't forget to follow LexTalk on all our platforms, our website, YouTube, Facebook, LinkedIn, Spotify, the whole shebang. Search for @LexTalk Podcast. We love connecting with you guys.
Yes, we're all in this together.
And as always, let's talk, let's learn, let's Lex talk.